Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. We are going to do this today for anybody who is a caregiver. If you're taking care of somebody, close person in your life, loved one, family member, there's a lot that goes along with that. But yes, I said the F word, family. There's interaction there, and there can be lots of challenges when others are involved within your family as you care for somebody. We're going to talk about that today with some help from somebody who coaches people on caregiving, walks the journey with them. She's done it herself. She's our professional of the year. Marika Humphreys is back with us. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Yes, and I love how you said the F word. It's family only sometimes, but I think caregiving is one of those situations where, yes, we can sometimes have a very fraught dynamic relationship with our family members. Yeah,
Yeah.
so today we can talk about some maybe tips and strategies to work with that.
Family is challenging in its own, but then you
Yes.
add the layer of caregiving, and there's so many different dynamics that come into play where somebody feels it should be done this way, or somebody's not even helping. And this, take us through that journey. Pick different scenarios and how we should deal with them.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think it does depend on the context that you're caregiving. So the people I focus on in my coaching business is people who are caring for their spouse. And one of the things that I think often comes up in that scenario is family members having lots of opinions about how you are doing things, how you should be doing things, or even it can be also, the caregiver, if you are the person taking care of your spouse, not getting enough help from your family members, or even if you have adult children, this is also something I encounter a lot, like not getting enough help. So those two problems, or those two challenges, we should say, like unwelcome opinions is a big one. And then also feeling like you should get more help, like your family members should offer more help. I think those are two big ones. And, you know, there's a couple, when I was thinking about this today, this topic in particular, I just want to say from the outset, like you mentioned, sometimes holidays are just challenging when there's no extra elements involved in our family, right? So dealing with our family is challenging. And I think one of the reasons is that we tend to have expectations about how others in our family should behave. This is true probably of most of the relationships we have in our lives. But when you think about it in terms of your family members, identifying, one of the strategies you can, I think, to just I think the goal, first of all, is to kind of lessen the tension or the emotions around the issue. Like if you're feeling, let's say, you feel like your family members aren't helping enough, or they aren't offering help, or you're doing all the care and other people should be contributing. Those are all just expectations we have in our own head. And the trouble is, each one of our family members is going to have their own expectations as well and their own view of a situation. So what may feel completely unfair to us may not at all feel that way to another person too. So I think just identifying first that recognizing that, look, we all are seeing the situation from our own perspective, and we all likely have very different views of the situation. And that can be really hard to see when we kind of tend to have our own perspective only, and it's hard to think like, how can you not see this?
Hmm. Perspective is everything. And I
Y-
guess as challenging as it can be sometimes when somebody, a family member, is interjecting their opinion and you don't agree, you have to take that, you have to tap the brakes and take a look at it from their eyes, and maybe you'll see it in a different way, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's so funny because I have two siblings, an older brother and sister, and we were recently together. We all live in different places now, but we were recently together and we were talking about our memories of childhood. And, we all have different memories of the same things. In fact, I was just recalling a memory that I had that nobody in the rest of my family could remember, that it was like something we did around the dinner table. I was shocked. And I bring that up like that nobody else remembered it. And I thought this was like a big thing. And so it's just a kind of a good example of how we all are each viewing the world through our own lens. Yes. And so I think the strategy there is, first of all, to lower your emotions. And if you want to engage with your family members, I think one good thing to approach things is, first of all, letting go of expectations. Like they probably, when we often go quick to blame, or whatever our dynamic is with that particular family member will come up more. I was recently coaching one of my recent clients. She had to deal with her siblings while being the executor of her father's will, and they were selling the home, and she was the executor, so she had kind of the responsibility to do it. But all the other siblings had very different opinions about how things should be done, and yet it fell on her shoulders. So it's like another example, right? Everybody has their own priorities, their own opinions coming into it. So one of the things we talked about is just starting with, what is the result that you want? In coaching, we call this result-oriented thinking.
Hmm.
What is the result that you want? And we tend to, often we can focus on the problem, like we don't see eye to eye, or they're not helping enough. That's the problem. Instead, what's the result? What's the goal that you want? Is it that you want more help? Is it that you need financial support? Is it that you need emotional support? Like figuring out what the result is that you want in a situation, in a caregiving situation, when it comes to your family members, is a good place to start instead of the problem. Because often when we start thinking the problem, we think they're the problem, or this is the problem. And again, we're each going to view that from a different perspective. So figuring out what is the goal or the result, and try and think of that in the most neutral terms, that's a really good starting point, I think, when you kind of are engaging with your family members.
What do you do in a situation where your family members are not contributing, they're not helping out, and it's mostly on your shoulders?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Mm.
And, one of the things, I mean, my answer is probably not going to be, it's not what we want to hear, but, we have this idea that life should be fair. I remember even as a little kid, like, life should be fair. We all grow up with this expectation. And yet, our whole experience, I mean, we all know that life is not fair at all, ever. It's rarely fair. And in sibling relationships or in, caregiving relationships, life is rarely fair. And so
Mm.
this idea that it should be fair or it should be equal or something, I think it's not a helpful way to think about our caregiving situation or the world in general. Because when we think that way, and then our experience is that life is not fair, then we're always going to feel like this sucks, and we're going to feel powerless because it's just, what can I do? And so this idea that life should be, I mean, the key there is should be fair, or
Mm.
it should be equal, or my, family members should help more. That's the kind of dangerous way to think, only because if you're thinking that way, it's just going to make you more miserable. So the
Mm.
switch there is, and it's a subtle one, right? But when we should, right, things should be one way, or we think they should be one way, and the reality is they're not. It's just we're always going to end up frustrated and kind of like banging our head against the wall. So the shift there is, again, identifying the result, like I would like more help. And maybe you think that should come from your family members, but maybe it's just, I need more help. And if you can get to the point where you think about what is the result I want, there may be other solutions that you're not seeing initially. So when we start thinking, oh, they should help more, my family members should help more, maybe they should give, help in a certain way. But if you can pull back and say, okay, really, I just need more support or I need more help, then you can actually potentially, and if you're not feeling, and if you can get to that point where you're a little more neutral, maybe a discussion with your family members like, hey, this is what I need, or this is what, our loved one needs. How can we solve this problem? And maybe there's other answers. Maybe someone is able to give money where they can't give time. Or maybe somebody has a connection or a friend who can help out. There are lots of ways to solve a problem. And the minute we start thinking it should be one way, and then we're not going to see other opportunities and we're just going to feel frustrated.
Should you just tell that family member or family members that I can't do this alone? All right, just and not blame anybody, but just say I need more help, people. This is just I'm stretched. Is that just basically the way to present it?
Yeah, I think so. I always encourage people to talk about, and this is like pretty common in therapy as well. When you want to bring up a difficult topic, you start with how you feel, right? Instead of saying you're not helping enough,
Right.
you're not doing this, right?
Sure.
Accusatory, which is going to make people defensive. You start with how you feel, or like you suggested, which I love, is what you need, right? I am struggling here. I really need more help. Can we figure out a way? And being sort of inclusive, avoiding any sort of language that makes people defensive. And anytime we start saying you do this or you're not doing this,
Right.
people just instinctively become defensive. And when we're defensive, we can't have a productive conversation. And it is very easy, I think, depending on dynamics in your family and the family member you're talking to, if there is a history there to kind of create a defensive engagement. And you do want to avoid that. I mean, you truly, truly want to avoid that. And I know that's super hard, again, if there's a history there in that relationship. And that is where talking to a coach or a therapist beforehand, like I think it's, if you do have anger or frustration already that you're feeling, you want to clear that up first. You have to clear it up with a friend, with somebody, and just kind of vent all your feelings so that when you have that conversation, you can be calm and not accusatory and just say, hey, I'm really struggling. This is what I need. Can you help me find a way, find a solution? And then people, that is a much more inviting way to collaborate versus you're not helping enough and I need more help. I'm dying over here. I really could use some help, that's going to
Sure.
not have the best solution. So yeah, starting with how you feel or what you need is a great approach.
How about some other challenges that you may encounter in caregiving with families and how to deal with them?
I've written a little bit about this too, about dealing with family members. And another one that comes up is kind of frustrations around how people do things, or maybe like the opinions they may give. And I think sometimes we have to be willing to let our family be who they are. and while it may be frustrating, but let go of control is really where I'm going with this. There's a lot of times where I think we want to control something a certain way, or and if somebody offers to help out and they do it in a way that, or the way they are helping out is not what you wanted, that's a difficult thing, but in the big scheme of things, like, hey, is this something you can let go of control on? So I'll give you, it's hard to talk without concrete examples. And so let me give you an example of that. One of my recent clients, actually, she's a current client. Her husband was dealing with cancer, and she's primary caregiver. She's like taken a little bit of a leave of absence from her job. She has two young children. She had a sister-in-law that was super great and supportive, but lived sort of far away and would just sort of book a last minute flight and pop in, and never really gave her much advance notice, like almost no advance notice, just said, hey, we're coming, I'm going to swing by today. And for my client, this was super frustrating because she just like, it was a structure around the day was really important. And her day, was just exhausting too.
Sure.
And so this was one of the things she's like, I don't know. She appreciated the help from the sister-in-law, but at the same time, she just really wanted, like, can you give me a heads up? And she had asked her sister-in-law, please give me a heads up. And, the sister-in-law heard it, but didn't do it. It's just not kind of her personality. She's sort of like a, impulsive person. And so we talked about it. She's like, what do I do? And, she kind of has two options, right? She can just let go and know, okay, hey, sister-in-law is well-meaning and wants to help, and this is the way she's going to do it. And I can just sort of let go of control here. Or she could tell her, she could again ask, hey, can you make sure to let me know at least in advance, And both I think are acceptable. And maybe there's a combination of both. And she basically did sort of a combination of both. But a big part of it was just recognizing this isn't in the big scheme, her stopping by unexpectedly. And she had done this repeatedly. It wasn't like a one-time event. So
Sure.
you can see that would get frustrating. But at the same time, it's like people are who they are. and this was a case where she ultimately decided to just not stress about it, and I think that's a good thing to like really keep in mind. Like, what are the things that you can just let go of control on? There may be some that you're not willing to. Maybe it does need to be a certain way, or you do need a real, to protect a certain thing, being done a certain way. And in those cases, I think, again, communicating the need is important. This is really important that, we take care of this at this time. But if you can at all let go of control and it's letting someone be who they are, that's often a softer way to kind of manage just the challenges of different personalities and different styles. And yeah, it's kind of learning to, be the willow tree or bend with the breeze. I don't know what the expression is, but yeah, I think that can be a really good approach that we don't, that's hard. We don't often think about that.
This is so emotionally challenging. It is family members, it can be in itself. But now when you're caring for somebody, you want to give them the best attention and all of that.
Yeah.
And now let's say you're stretched thin and you need help, or
Yeah.
they're giving you too much help or butting in, if you will,
Yeah.
when they shouldn't. Judgment call, I would assume at that point. But it's real,
Yeah.
you got to deal with that.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot going on here where it can set people off, I would imagine.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things we talk about often in my coaching practice is just this comes down to so many situations come down to, what do I control here and what do I not? And at any point when you are feeling frustrated, I think it's a great time, because frustration is an emotion we feel when things aren't like the way we want them to be, right? Or we can't do something, or we're kind of like hitting a roadblock. And that is a great time to literally, a simple technique is to make a list. And we're at the top of the list, you write the situation, somebody not helping or need more support with caregiving. And then you make two columns. And on one side, you write all the things that you can't control. What are all the things in this situation that I can't control? And then what can I control? And you just make a list. And you'll see we can't control how people, when they show up. We can't control how people behave. We can't control what people think is fair or not fair. All that we can control is our response to it. And sometimes we need to see that for ourselves in black and white, because our mind will, a lot of times when we're feeling frustrated or exasperated around family members, even angry. I mean, a lot of times it can be, there can be a lot of,
Sure.
tough emotions around family. Always come back to what is it that I can control here and what can I not control, and just get really clear with that, because so much of life and the things around us are just not within our control. And it doesn't mean, it just means that we need to remove our focus from that and say, okay, what is it that is within my control? And that's always how we decide to show up in face of that situation, right? If you've got the super bossy family member who likes to tell you everything that they think you should be doing and you're doing it all wrong, what can you control there? You can ask them to stop. We've kind of talked about that before, right? You can ask them to stop and they may or may not, but you can decide, I just am simply not going to take it personally, or I'm not going to, listen and take it to heart, or I'm just going to let them be who they are and not let it affect my day, or I'm going to get support in other ways so I can deal with these challenging family members. Like, those are the things that are within our control. And that is always how we will feel empowered, is when we're staying focused on the column that we can control and getting really clear, like, if it's out of your control, don't waste energy on it. It's easier said than done, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm just about out of time, but I want to ask this question. Should you write all this down? So one column, things you can control, things you can't control, or things you want help with, like organizing your thoughts as opposed to trying to put it all up here where it gets all mumbo jumbo and you're dealing with emotions and, well, I have to get meds now, all of that stuff going on at once. Put it in front of you. Do you think that's a good idea?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Writing down the things you can control and the things you can't. Writing down what, we talked about results focused thinking. What do you actually want? If you can get that in black and white and separate it from all your opinions, that's really helpful. That's how we clarify our thoughts, is by writing it down. And I do think it is important to have a place to sort of vent your emotions separate. Like, it needs to be separate, because we all have that. We all need to vent. And then we need to be able to move past those and then be able to have the calm conversation or have the productive conversation. So find a place for you to vent. And that can be also on paper in a journal. You can call your family members names, and then you got to move past it, though. You got to be willing to let it go so that you can have a productive conversation. But it's a way to get those emotions out and acknowledge them and, kind of, it is hard. And then I'm going to be a calm adult here, and we're going to have a productive conversation.
Well, it's a release. Some say you write it down, crumple it up, and throw it in a fire, and you let it go to the universe.
Yes.
Somebody wants to have a conversation with you, Marika. What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, my website is definitely the best way. CoachMarika.com. So www.coachmarika.com. And on there, I do have linked to my podcast, as well as a way to get in touch with me and set up a meeting. If you're looking for support, that's the best way to reach out.
Yeah, we in the caregiving area, we need help. You can't do it alone. Sometimes you have to, because you're not getting that support, but at least you help people navigate all of that, even dealing with the families. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. We'll talk next time, and we're coming right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.